For years, Ghana's gold story looked perfect on paper. Ships left the ports full. Export numbers climbed, global markets kept buying, nothing appeared broken. And yet, the outcome never matched the effort. A country sitting on one of the world's richest gold belts still behaved like it was waiting for approval, still negotiated from a weak position, still watched value escape somewhere between the mine and the market. That contradiction is where this story begins, because the problem was never how much gold Ghana had. It wasn't about illegal mining, or foreign buyers, or global prices. It was about when control slipped away, and how early in the journey that happened. Long before gold reached international markets, before contracts were signed or prices announced, something decisive was already being lost. Recently, Ghana made a quiet change at that exact moment. No drama, no slogans, just a shift so precise that it redefined the entire chain. The question is simple. What did Ghana finally touch that it had avoided for decades? Let's find out. What Ghana finally touched was not the gold itself, but the moment when gold stops being potential and starts becoming power. That moment does not happen on the ground. Mining feels dramatic, dangerous, expensive, and visible, so people assume that's where the battle is won or lost. But mining only creates raw material. It does not create authority. The real shift happens later, at a stage most people never see, and almost no one talks about, the moment when gold is first judged. This is where purity is decided, where weight is adjusted, where the metal is no longer gold from somewhere, but a quantified asset that markets recognize, trust, and price accordingly. Once this judgment is made, everything downstream is locked in. The price bracket, the credibility, the destination, and who gets leverage from it. For decades, Ghana's gold crossed that threshold outside the country. The gold left the mine still undefined, still unfinished. And once it reached foreign furnaces and labs, Ghana stopped being the authority in its own story. From that point on, others decided how pure it was, how valuable it was, and how it would move. Not through conspiracy, through the process, through routine, through systems designed long ago that quietly excluded the producer from the decisive step. This is why Ghana could mine more gold, yet feel weaker every year. The country did the hardest physical work, but surrendered the intellectual and financial control that follows. The gold became global before it ever became Ghanaian in the only way that matters, on paper, in vaults, and in markets. And this loss was invisible. There was no theft, no broken law, no scandal. Just a habit repeated year after year, export first, define later. By the time the gold came back into the conversation, it was already priced, categorized, and owned in every sense that matters. That's why reforming mines never fixed the problem. That's why increasing production never changed leverage. That's why gold booms didn't translate into dominance, because Ghana was fighting at the wrong stage. The real loss wasn't the gold leaving the soil, it was the gold left unfinished. Once you see that, the question stops being, how much gold does Ghana produce, and becomes something far more uncomfortable. Why was Ghana willing to let others finish its gold for so long? Because the gold Ghana was most willing to let others finish. It was also the gold Ghana that never fully organized in the first place. Artisanal and small-scale mining gold sat in a strange space. It was everywhere, yet nowhere. Dug by thousands of individuals across forests, riverbeds, and informal pits. Bought in small quantities, moved in fragments, priced inconsistently, recorded poorly, if at all. On paper, it looked like a governance headache. In reality, it was something far more dangerous, a permanent blind spot. That blind spot made life easy for everyone except Ghana. When gold is fragmented, no single authority truly controls it. There's no unified valuation, no fixed trail, no final checkpoint where the country can say, this is what we produced, this is what it's worth, and this is where it's going. Every gap becomes an opportunity for underpricing, for quiet diversion, for gold to slip into foreign systems already finished before Ghana ever touches the decisive step. And this wasn't always framed as a problem. For years, the chaos was treated as inevitable. Artisanal mining was described as informal, traditional, and too dispersed to organize properly. The assumption was simple: let the gold move, deal with it later. But later never came, because once the gold left that informal space and crossed borders, it was no longer Ghana's to define. This is where the contradiction deepened. Ghana was tightening regulations. Ghana was reforming mining laws. Ghana was increasing its output. Yet the most fluid part of its gold economy, the artisanal segment, kept leaking value precisely because it never passed through a single, controlled moment of definition. No furnace, no standard. No unified judgment of purity and ownership. That meant Ghana didn't just lose money. It lost visibility. You cannot negotiate powerfully over something you cannot fully see. You cannot leverage what you cannot precisely measure. And you certainly cannot command markets with gold that becomes official only after someone else has already processed it. As long as artisanal gold remained scattered, Ghana was locked out of the most powerful stage of the gold life cycle. Every reform stopped short. Every policy hit a ceiling. Not because the state lacked authority, but because the gold never entered a system where that authority could actually be exercised. So the problem stopped being about miners, enforcement, or legality. It became a routing problem. If artisanal gold could be forced to pass through one controlled point, the chaos would collapse instantly. Not through force, not through crackdowns, but through structure. Which raises the turning point of this story. What happened when Ghana stopped trying to chase artisanal gold and instead decided to redirect it? It happened when Ghana stopped treating artisanal gold as something to police and started treating it as something to route. Instead of trying to control thousands of miners individually, the state focused on one far simpler move: deciding where the gold must go next. That decision is where the Ghana Gold Board stepped in. Not as a loud regulator, not as a threat, but as a funnel. From that moment, artisanal gold purchased through official channels was no longer allowed to drift into multiple paths. It was pulled inward. One buyer, one custody chain, one destination. The chaos that had protected underpricing and invisibility didn't get fixed. It collapsed. That destination was Gold Coast Refinery. On the surface, this looked ordinary. Countries send gold to refineries all the time. But this was not a handoff. It was a rerouting. The refinery wasn't absorbing the gold into its own system. It wasn't buying it. It wasn't negotiating price or ownership. It was being used as an instrument. That distinction is everything. Because for the first time, Ghana's most scattered gold entered a single, uninterrupted process without ever leaving Ghanaian custody. No side exits. No informal detours. No moment where the gold became someone else's responsibility. The same entity that bought the gold sent it in, waded through the furnace, and received it back, transformed, but unchanged in ownership. This is where the old system quietly broke. In the past, artisanal gold only became real once it reached foreign refineries. That was the moment it was purified, standardized, and accepted as tradable bullion. Ghana watched that moment happen from the outside. Now, that moment was being dragged home. The gold didn't just move physically, it moved conceptually. It went from being a loose commodity floating through informal markets to being a state-tracked asset moving through a controlled chain. That shift doesn't just increase revenue, it changes behavior. Once miners know there is a fixed buyer, once buyers know there is a single route, once markets know the gold will re-emerge refined and verified, informality stops being profitable. But here's the twist that makes this move dangerous to the old order. The refinery did not become the new power center. It didn't replace foreign control with private local control. It didn't sit above the state. It sat under it. Which leads to the detail that matters most, and the one that determines whether this entire system works or collapses. If the refinery doesn't own the gold, then who does at every single stage? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. The answer is simple, but its consequences are not. The gold never stopped belonging to Ghana. At no point, before refining, during refining, or after, did ownership transfer to the refinery. The gold entered the furnace owned by the state entity, and it exited the furnace owned by the same entity. The refinery did not buy it, did not price it, did not collateralize it, and did not decide its future. It performed a function and stepped aside. This is the point where most people misunderstand what just happened. In the old system, refining was never neutral. Whoever refined the gold quietly gained influence over it. Processing delays became leverage. Quality assessments became bargaining tools. International standards became a gate that only certain players could open. Ownership on paper might have stayed African for a while, but authority slipped the moment gold entered someone else's system. Ghana removed that vulnerability by refusing to hand the gold over at the most sensitive moment. But keeping ownership is meaningless if the gold that comes out isn't accepted globally. That's where the second, less visible move comes in. The gold is refined to international standards through technical alignment with Rand Refinery, the most established refinery on the continent. This matters because it eliminates the usual excuse used against African refined gold: doubts about purity, consistency, or credibility. Ghana didn't lower the bar to gain control. It met the bar inside its own borders. That combination, retained ownership plus global-grade refinement, creates a rare condition. Ghana's gold no longer needs to travel abroad to become real. It doesn't need a second furnace. It doesn't need reassaying. It doesn't need reinterpretation by foreign institutions before markets take it seriously. This is where the power balance shifts quietly but permanently. Once gold meets international standards without leaving the country, external refineries stop being gatekeepers. They can no longer slow transactions, renegotiate value, or quietly extract influence by controlling the moment of legitimacy. The gold speaks for itself the moment it leaves the furnace. And this changes how the state relates to its own resources. Gold stops being something Ghana sells first and understands later. It becomes something Ghana understands fully before it ever leaves. That reverses decades of dependency without rewriting a single mining law or blocking a single export route. Still, there's one final layer that determines whether this control is symbolic or real. Referring to global standards is one thing. Proving, documenting, and defending that standard is another. So how does Ghana demonstrate beyond doubt that its gold is verified, trusted, and controlled by its own institutions? What makes the shift undeniable to the outside world? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. It became undeniable the moment Ghana stopped proving control with words and started proving it with marks that cannot be argued with. When the refined gold emerged, it did not come out anonymous. It did not come out waiting for validation elsewhere. It came out already carrying the identity of the state. Each bullion bar bore the stamps of Ghana's own institutions, proof that purity, custody, and legitimacy had been handled internally, not outsourced at the final step. This is where control stops being abstract. A stamp is not a decoration. In the gold world, a stamp is a declaration of responsibility. It says who tested the metal, who guarantees its quality, and who stands behind it if something goes wrong. For decades, African gold carried foreign stamps because that was the only way markets would accept it. Ghana just replaced that dependency with its own institutional signature. This matters because markets don't trust speeches. They trust systems, and systems leave physical evidence. By embedding national verification into the bullion itself, Ghana closed the last remaining escape route for doubt. No foreign lab needs to confirm what Ghana already certified. No overseas facility needs to reprocess what Ghana already standardized. The gold exits the country finished, legible, and defensible. That changes how negotiations work. Instead of selling raw or semi-defined metal and accepting whatever terms come back, Ghana now holds an asset that can be deployed strategically. Gold that is already verified can be stored, pledged, delayed, or sold on Ghana's timing, not rushed out because someone else controls the final approval. This is the moment where gold stops behaving like an export commodity and starts behaving like a financial instrument. And notice what didn't happen. Ghana didn't ban exports. It didn't threaten buyers. It didn't declare resource nationalism. It simply made sure that before gold ever left, every question about it had already been answered at home. That's why this step is so hard to reverse. Once institutions are stamped into the process, undoing it would require deliberately giving power back away. The gold itself now carries evidence of where authority lives, which makes the timing of all this impossible to ignore. Because the refinery existed before, the gold existed before, the need existed before. So the final question isn't about capability or capacity anymore. Why did Ghana wait this long to activate the one step that locks control permanently in place? Because activating this step was never a technical decision, it was a political and psychological one. Ghana waited because finishing gold changes who gets comfortable and who doesn't. As long as the gold was left unfinished, responsibility was blurred. Losses could be blamed on prices, markets, smugglers, or history. Power stayed diffuse. No single institution had to fully stand behind the metal. That ambiguity protected many arrangements that worked quietly for a long time. Turning this system on removed that comfort. The moment Ghana decided that gold would be refined, verified, stamped, and controlled at home, excuses disappeared. From that point on, the state could no longer pretend it didn't know the value of what it held. It could no longer hide behind foreign processes or external validation. Control brings accountability, and accountability is expensive. It demands competence, coordination, and the willingness to own outcomes, good or bad. That's why this step sat dormant even when the infrastructure existed. What changed wasn't machinery. It wasn't expertise, it was risk tolerance. By finishing its gold, Ghana accepted something far heavier than bullion: responsibility for pricing, timing, storage, credibility, and consequence. That's not a move you make when you're unsure of your institutions or your political footing. It's a move you make when delay becomes more dangerous than action. And once that threshold was crossed, everything else followed naturally. The refinery moved into full use. Artisanal gold was pulled into a single route. Verification stopped happening abroad. Authority stopped being borrowed. Nothing dramatic had to be announced because the shift wasn't symbolic. It was structural. Systems changed, and systems don't need applause to work. This is why the story doesn't end with Ghana. Because once one country proves that the most powerful step in the resource chain can be reclaimed quietly, without confrontation, the myth that this is just how things work collapses. The excuse disappears for every other country watching from the same position Ghana used to occupy. The lesson isn't build a refinery. The lesson is finish what you start. Mining without finishing is effort without power. Exporting without defining is motion without leverage. Ghana didn't become rich overnight. It did something far more dangerous to the old order. It stopped being unfinished. So the final question now isn't whether this model works. It's this: how many African countries are willing to accept the responsibility that comes with control? Let us know in the comments section. How many will keep exporting halfway because finishing still feels too risky? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.